Welcome back to my channel. Before we dive into my life story, because I am under spiritual attack, I ask that you join me in a quick prayer. So dear Heavenly Father, I come to you with my petition and prayer, giving you all the thanksgiving and glory one could. I repent and I ask for forgiveness of my sins and my trespasses, and for those who have sinned and trespassed against me, they know not what they do. So I come to you for your refuge with joy, for your shelter against the attack of the devil. Protect me, O Lord, from the craftiness of the enemy, and save me from his evil plots. Cover me with your presence when I feel weak, so that he will flee from my presence. In Jesus' name, I ask for divine protection over me, my family, and my channel. Thank you, Heavenly Father. Amen. So I'm going to start from scratch with my folks and how they met and a little bit about their upbringing. So my father, David. I think it's so cool that my dad is named David because I always think about King David. And my grandma, his mother, was Mary. Mother Mary. I think that's pretty cool. But my dad was the oldest of 8, and he was born into a family of poverty. My grandfather couldn't read or write. He was an alcoholic. You know, all the children were abused. And a lot of that got put on my dad because he was the oldest of 8. There was 4 boys and 4 girls. My dad, David, he started using heroin at 14 years old with a needle. And I think about that even right now. I get teary-eyed thinking that my dad was so tortured as a child that he went to something like that. But he was born in Orange County, Huntington Beach. He was the oldest of 8, like I said, and he had to watch his mom, my grandmother Mary, get beat on a regular basis when my grandfather Frank would come home from whatever he was doing. He didn't know how to read or write, my grandfather. We're talking about like some, I don't even know the word I'm looking for, but my dad got brought up horribly, and unfortunately he did not break the cycle. He carried it on into his adulthood. But he was a real good looking guy. My dad had like sandy blonde hair and green eyes and a big smile and a big chest, and he was a very gifted boxer. He was a fighter. In fact, he was training at the Orange County gym, I believe, and my mom told me this story. He was sparring with George Foreman's manager at the time, and George Foreman held me as a baby. But my mom, you know, I got a lot of this information from my mother, and she told me that I don't know what his name was, but the guy that was managing my father was disgusted with how unbelievably talented my father was, and he was a good-looking guy, and how he was giving his life to drugs and to the needle and to heroin, and he basically kicked my dad out of his gym. And my dad was known as the man with ether in his hands. He put everyone to sleep with one punch, kind of like Mike Tyson. So I did grow up a lot watching boxing and all the fights and all that stuff, and those are good memories I have of my father and that. But my mother, her name is Kathy, and she was adopted into a really well-to-do family. My mother had a beautiful upbringing, and she has good memories, and it makes me so happy, and I don't even know how to put it into words. It makes me happy when my mom explains her childhood to me and what it was like, because my childhood was nothing like my mother's. She had everything. She had parents that were there for her, that provided for her. You know, she had an Austin Healey convertible at 16 years old, and she grew up in Torrance, California. My dad was in Huntington Beach. So my mom had an entirely different upbringing than my father. She was brought up happy and didn't know what abuse was. My father had to watch his father beat his mother, and my mother watched her father treat her mother like a queen, you know? So very much two different lifestyles. But my mom grew up in, she was born in Torrance, and then her folks moved to Las Vegas. And in Las Vegas, That's where my mom went to school, and her high school boyfriend, I have to get his name from her. I don't remember his name, but he actually became a rock star, which isn't too far off, because I have a love for music, and unfortunately musicians, so I think it kind of ran in the family a little bit. My dad hated that. When I was growing up, my dad used to get so mad at my mom because I loved musicians and I wanted to go to concerts and travel around, and he did let me and my mom do that, but he didn't like it. But back to my mom. She actually grew up in Vegas. Her boyfriend ended up being a rock star, and I don't remember his name, but I'll get it from her. But, you know, she went to all the dances, she had the convertible, she was beautiful, all that stuff. Well, she was working at the Hilton in Las Vegas as a coffee girl, and Elvis Presley, that's when he rolled through Vegas, and my mom ended up meeting them and actually dating, I believe, his stepbrother. And so my mom was a part of the whole Elvis Presley entourage. And oh my gosh, my mom has told me stories. They are just unreal. My mom really had, my mom has some stories for you, but they're not mine to tell. But she hung out with Elvis and that whole clique. And so that's kind of, so my mom grew up happy, healthy, beautiful, good folks, good parents. My dad was, you know, in the, you know, poverty, watching his dad beat his mother and not breaking the cycle. So the way my folks met is, this is so cool, and the apple never falls far from the tree. My mom's parents owned a nightclub in Torrance, California. They ended up moving back to Los Angeles, and it was called the French Quarter, and this was like the disco days, and my mom was a disco queen. And guess what? My dad, David, was the bouncer. It's so funny to me when I think about my life and everything I've gone through. But from what my mom has told me, my dad was friends with her brother, and my mom was adopted. So what's kind of funny to me is my dad was very charming, and he had the gift of gab and all that BS. But so I guess he was out at the French Quarter one night, and my mom walked by, and he was hanging out talking with her brother, who, you know, it was the owner's son. And my mom walked by, and this is my mom telling me the story. She goes, my dad walked by, and I guess he said to her brother, "Who the hell is that?" And her brother said, "That's my sister." And my dad goes, "There's no way you're related." And they, you know, she was adopted, so it wasn't blood. I think that's pretty funny. But she said the first thing my dad did is he walked up to her and he flattered her with all that BS, and he tapped her on the shoulder, and this is what his first words to her is, "You sure do look gorgeous tonight." And that had my mom, you know, when she tells me that story, it just, you know, the happiness, you know, that feeling when you meet the person, you know, whether they're good for you or not, or toxic or any of that person that makes you feel that. And there's only usually one or two people in a lifetime that is able to make you feel that way. So she had that feeling at that time with my dad, and that's pretty cool. So he asked her out, and of course her parents didn't want her dating not just the bouncer, but a very bad boy. My dad was a bad boy, and he could fight, and he looked good and all that stuff, but she fell for it, as good girls do fall for bad boys. And you know, the first date, according to my mom, he stood her up on, which I just and then the second date, there was some, I don't know the whole story, but there was some girl with long legs sitting on the hood of my dad's car as they rolled up. My mom picked him up, she was dropping him off, and some woman with long dark hair with long legs sitting on the hood of his car. And I just think that's so funny that my dad, you don't know my dad, so that's kind of funny. But on their first date, I guess they were out there dancing on the dance floor, and this is a really cool story, and this is a story I love telling people. It's just so cool. So I guess they were out there dancing on the dance floor, and some dude came up and he tapped my dad on the shoulder, And my dad said, I'll be right back. And he left, and I guess he came back, and his hair looked a little tousled, and my mom didn't think anything of it. And they just kept dancing. Well, then another guy came and tapped him on the shoulder, and then another. This went on for a little bit of time. Well, I don't know what the beef was, but there was something going on. My dad wasn't working that night bouncing at the club, but they were there dancing. So there was something going on with these people, and I guess a guy came and got my dad and took him out to the parking lot. And my dad, he fought all of them, and he won all of it. It kept going one after another. So from my understanding, that caused my mother's parents a crazy lawsuit, like in 1978, like close to $500,000. So they weren't fans of my father whatsoever. Not at all. Not at all. And I can understand that as a 43-year-old woman, as an adult. They didn't want that for their daughter, But she went for it. She jumped on it, and she told me, like, one of the coolest things is, like, I wasn't an accident. My parents wanted to have me. They wanted me. My dad had 2 other children from a previous marriage that didn't work out, and his ex-wife, and I don't know all the details, but I'm sure she had her reasons, left him with his kids, and he was brokenhearted over losing his children. And my mom had been married before in a bad relationship and had a son. So I have a half-brother from my mom and a half-brother and half-sister from my dad. But when you fall in love like that, it's natural. You want to have a baby. And so when my mom tells me these stories, she's like, Precious, we wanted you. We wanted you so badly. So she was pregnant with me before they got married. And the story that my mom told me is that they were at the park, and she was 8.5 months pregnant with me. And my dad had a dog, a boxer named Budkiss, and anybody that knows the Rocky movies knows about the dog Budkiss in the movie. So that's who my dad named his dog after. But he would babysit my brother and like watch him as he was playing at the park. So they were in the car together watching. Budkiss was watching my brother, and my dad said, "Let's do it. Let's go get married." So I'm sure that's what she wanted. So they dropped her son off with her folks, and I don't think they told them what they were doing. But they got in the car, and from Los Angeles, they drove to Vegas on Friday the 13th at the Candlelight Chapel. And that just, that fits. So they got married when my mom was 8.5 months pregnant with me. And they were in love. And they wanted me. And, I asked my mom, like, why did you name me Precious? It was brutal growing up with. It was so hard. There was a target on my forehead, my back, everything. Well, I guess, shockingly, my dad went to jail a few weeks before my mom had me. And again, I'm surprised I haven't researched this more, because I am rather curious about it. But my mom was watching a movie based on a true story, and from what my mother told me, there was a woman in prison that ended up having an affair with one of the guards, and she got pregnant, and this is based on a true story, and they let her have the baby in prison, and she named her Precious. And my mom said as soon as she heard that name, she knew. So she come up with that name before she ever seen me, But she said she knew that was the name. I was going to be Amber Nicole. And my dad's brother, unfortunately, who passed away, had a daughter just a couple months before me who I've never met. And he named her Amber. So then it was going to be Nicole. But it ended up being Precious Nicole. So that's pretty cool. That's how my mom came up with my name. So my mom was scheduled to have a cesarean with me on May the 7th. That was her due date. And she told me on May the 6th, she was folding laundry and her water broke. And she was so scared. She said she was scared. But she told my dad, and they jumped in the car, and she said he was driving so fast that they kept hitting the speed bumps, but she kept raising up in the car. And he said she wanted a girl. And back then, 43 years ago, they couldn't tell you what the sex of the baby was going to be. So my father told my mom, if it's not a girl, we'll try again. And she was like, because she didn't want to go through that again. So at 9:15, it's a girl. It's me. And so she was she almost had a heart attack on the spot, I guess. She was so excited. She had never been that high before with whatever they gave her. And my dad, being the drug addict he was, my mom told me this. He said, my mom's name is Kathy, and he goes, Kathy, just enjoy it. My dad. But anyways, so that's how that all came about. And my mom told me, that I was just a really, really good baby. I was really sweet. I did everything I was supposed to do. I didn't cry a lot, all that stuff. But I guess my dad went to jail for 3 days when I was about 8 months old. And in that 3-day period, my mom told me that I refused to sleep, I wouldn't eat, and I was being naughty until my dad got out of jail. But she said other than that, I was always a really, really good baby. But anyway, so that's how I was born. And so we were living in Huntington Beach at the time. And my dad had a serious, serious heroin addiction. It was awful. And my mom and him decided to move up north to Sacramento. And really, he just traded one drug for another. He went from heroin to crystal meth. My dad, just such a tortured soul. So anyways, we moved out to Sacramento. And she was away from her parents and her family and everything. And that's when, the real abuse kicked in. My dad was so abusive, and I love my father. But again, he just carried on what his father showed him, was to beat on women and hurt children. And it's just so sad. My dad had all the potential to be so many great things. He was talented. He could have done so much. That's why George Foreman's manager was disgusted with my dad, because he had so much potential. Now, my mother growing up, she was a rich girl. She was a beautiful rich girl that didn't know a life of struggle and violence and abuse and drugs and all that. So this was very new to my mother, and she was scared of my dad. And, he pulled the whole, if you leave me, you'll never see Precious. If you leave me, I'll kill your parents. And you know what? She believed him, and maybe he meant it, but that's not what would have happened. That's just what he wanted her to believe, all the brainwashing and the mind control and the conditioning. But with that being said, we moved out here, and my dad wasn't one for working. It was just odd jobs here and there. And it was mainly construction, that type of thing. And my mom decided to start a housekeeping business. Now, my mom grew up a rich girl with everything, so that had to be very hard on my mother to, try to come up with, a way to make a living and support 2 kids, because she had my brother as well, along with my father. So my mother came up with the idea to start a housekeeping business, and she wrote out flyers, and I helped her pass them out. We'd go find neighborhoods that were really nice, and once a couple people had my mom work for them, then it was a word of mouth, and my mom actually had a little business for herself. And my dad stayed at home and just did drugs, and and he would take off for days at a time. I remember one time my dad split, and we didn't have a car. We didn't have a phone. He left a woman with 2 small children. My brother was 5 years older than me, so 2 small children with no car or no phone. And he would take whatever we had, and he would go off on drug binges and not come home. So this is what I was going to say. We would walk, to and from the bus stop, to and from the grocery store, and we would have a landmark. It was a tree. We're almost home. And we saw that landmark. I think it was 8 days in a row we didn't hear from my dad. And my mom would bring in a mattress, and she'd sleep in my room. She'd camp out in my room with me, and I didn't understand, but it was because when my dad would come home, he was out of his mind on drugs. Crystal meth, it turns you into a demon, basically. They accuse you of everything under the sun. They lie, they cheat, they steal, they beat. My dad, I watched my father put my mother through so much, and I did not understand it. I didn't understand it, and I'd watch him beat on her. I remember so many things, but there was one. My mom would always say, "Go to your room, Precious. Go to your room," to try to get me to not see it. But who I'm hearing my mom scream and getting beat on. You know, it was awful. And I remember one time I saw and my dad was a boxer, so he knew how to fight. My mom was like a little 5'1", tiny woman. And I remember she made me go outside, and I remember looking in the window, and I saw my dad sitting on top of my mom beating her. And I remember her nose was bloody, and oh God, it was awful. And I saw that type of thing for years. And my mom was just doing what my dad told her to do to get me to not tell anybody about the abuse that was going on. And what happened was, the older I got, the more the more I would go to defend her. You know, so if he was fighting her, I would jump in it, and then it would become he turned on me, basically, because I would have my mother's back. And I remember my mom always saying, Precious, just go to your room. And my dad was brutal, you guys. There are just no words. And it's really important. Unfortunately, I ended up getting with men a lot like my dad. So it does definitely, mothers set the example for their kids on what to take, what to accept, and what not. So I kind of ended up going down that road myself. But anyways, my parents just had me brainwashed, like what to say, what not to say. I was a very quiet child, and it's because I was traumatized at home. I was traumatized listening to my dad cuss my mother, beat on my mother. I remember we would be hungry sometimes, and my dad would take off with whatever we had. And I remember I do have memories of walking to, we lived in, I believe it was Carmichael, and there was a church there, and we would walk to the church occasionally to get food. And I remember one time when we went to church, like at the food bank part, they had like glazed donuts, like maple donuts, and it was so good. I'll never forget that in a million years. And then right next to the church, like just pretty much right next to it, there was a Goodwill. And my mom, realized that people would unload things, like donate things, and they would be in the back. And so we were poor, you guys. We didn't have anything. And so me and my mom and my brother would go to the back of the Goodwill late at night, and we'd try to find stuff and that type of thing. And my mom's parents really weren't in our lives too much. They did not like my dad. They hated that my mom went down this road with my dad. But they would visit us occasionally, like on Christmas, and they would bring all kinds of presents. And those were good memories I had. But my dad he felt so inadequate that he couldn't provide for his family. And so, unfortunately, my dad, he sabotaged that whole relationship with my mom and her parents. And basically, my mom, they kind of disowned her because of my father. And that's really sad, because my mom loved her parents. She loved her dad. She talked about what a good dad she had and all that. But, so that's part of abuse. They isolate you. They ruin friendships and relationships, so you kind of only have them to depend on. That was my father. But anyways, so we moved to Sacramento. My dad goes into crystal meth. My mom starts her housekeeping business. I remember going to work with my mom. She would work 2 jobs sometimes, 4 hours in the morning and then 4 hours in the afternoon, and we would take the bus, the RT bus. And, my mom tried to make it as fun for me as she could. She did. I remember going to the 7-Eleven on our way to one of her jobs, and she would always get me like a hot sandwich, a soda, and a bag of chips and a candy bar, and she would set me up with that, and I'd watch I Love Lucy, and my dad didn't like it too much. My mom had me watch her soap operas for her and report to her on commercial what was going on, because she was working, But that was kind of what we did. We'd come home, and we just never knew what we were coming home to, ever. We never knew what we were walking into. And the sad part is when my dad was sober, which was not often, he was so cool to be around. He was so cool. He was cool, But those drugs just destroyed my father. They destroyed my father. And it breaks my heart to think about all of that. But growing up with the way I grew up, no one ever talked about God, or we didn't go to church. It wasn't talked down on. It just wasn't a subject in the house. my parents basically just told me to go to my room most of the time, and they were always fighting. But my mom did her best. She really did. She tried really hard to give me the best life she could with what she had, and she did do that. She always made sure I had, decent school clothes, and she would do my hair, and I would look cute. I wouldn't look like some straggly, raggedy kid going to school. She did make sure that I had that. But she always wanted to get me involved in things like dance, gymnastics, beauty pageants. But that stuff cost money, and we did not have it. But she really tried to get me to go down that path, and I guess everything for a reason. But it was sad because she did put me in dance, and I remember I was pretty good at it. And I remember one time in dance class, I think it was called Dolores's or something. I was in dance class, and none of the other kids are getting the dance, and I did. And she's like, Precious, you come up and you show everybody. And then I was able to repeat the dance. I'll never forget that. That was pretty cool. But my mom couldn't afford to keep me in any activities like that. And going into school, having the name Precious, that was so hard, you guys. It was so hard. It was hard, and I was always made fun of, and I was always really quiet. And I remember when my mom would walk me to the school bus in the morning, I was like attached to my mother's hip. I never wanted to be away from my mother. You talk about separation anxiety, I hated being away from my mom. And I remember there's pictures of me on the school bus waving goodbye to my mom with tears running down my face, pigtails in my hair, and tears running down my face. I hated being away from my mother. And the people at school knew there was stuff going on at home. They did. They knew there was stuff going on at home. And I do remember occasionally, a couple times, I was questioned, but I was trained so good to not rat my dad out, you know what I mean? And I was good at it. And there's a memory, or my mom or my dad, I forget who told me, but when I was 5 years old, I don't remember what happened, but I guess the FBI or something came and talked with me regarding a gun incident with him and my brother. Now, I don't know what took place. I don't remember, but a gun was shot off in the house, and my brother went and, told a teacher or something. Well, anyways, the law got involved, and I did get interviewed by the FBI, and according to what my mother told, I think it was my mom told me, that the FBI agent went and talked to my dad, and he said if it wasn't for your daughter, you would be going to prison right now. So I was trained really good to not rat my parents out. But anyways, that was kind of what life at home was like growing up, watching my dad beat on my mother, hurting my mother, always being told, don't tell anyone, don't tell anyone. That sucks. So I was quiet when I was in school, and I was like, it was sad. I was tortured. I was always the last to get picked for anything. Now, I wasn't an athlete, and I certainly wasn't like into sports or anything. But I remember in like PE, they'd get to pick two people to pick teams. I was always the last one called, and that didn't feel good. But anyway, so I didn't really enjoy school at all. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that there was so much abuse going on at home, you guys. It was horrible. And my dad really didn't start in with me too much until I was about 13 or 14 years old. And it's because when I got older, I saw what was going on, and I naturally went to defend my mother. And it really turned my dad against me. His head was so messed up. He was such a sick individual, and he just could not put the needle down. He could not put the needle down. I remember in 1991, it's quite the memory. We went to go visit my dad's brother in Carmichael, California, and it was like a really ghetto, bad neighborhood with a lot of gang activity. And when my dad was around his brother, of course they, pumped each other up, and they were always looking for fights. That's what they liked to do. They enjoyed it. Now, I don't remember everything that happened, but basically the show Cops was in Sacramento and ended up, I never saw the episode, so I don't think it made it, but the Cops was out recording, and I remember my uncle faked a heart attack, and they were loading him up in the ambulance, and I remember the cops, big old camera in my uncle's face, and my uncle was flipping the camera off. That's kind of funny. But I was subjected to things like that. I was. And when my dad would disappear for a few days, like he went in jail for the night or something, my mom had peace for a few hours. I hated watching my mom cry. I hated watching my mother go through that. I hated it. I hated it. I hated it. I hated it so much. But anyways, so I grew up witnessing things like that. And so my brother lived with us for a while, and then he bounced, man. My mom's parents ended up taking him, which was better for him. My dad was so abusive to my brother. It was horrible. My dad was really bad to my brother, and I'm really sorry that happened to him. But when he moved away and he went to my mom's folks in Vegas, that was a better life for him. So it was just me and my mom and my dad. And my Uncle Steve did live with us for quite a bit. But it was like typical. It was nothing but fighting, accusations, threats. I remember, just as an example, just to give you an idea, my dad was so ruthless. He was so brutal. And my uncle had a lot of health problems and a lot of things wrong with him. And I don't know what exactly was said, but my dad, they were fighting. And basically he said something to my dad, "I'm going to kill myself," something like that. And my dad's like, "Do it." I was only like 18 or 19 years old, but I had like this feeling, like something's up. And so I went to go in the back room to check on my uncle, and he slit his own throat, you guys. From ear to ear, he slit his own throat. And when I walked in the room, his neck was back and his throat was open and he was bleeding. So he ended up surviving. I guess the doctor said, "I've seen a lot of things, but someone slitting their own throat, I haven't seen." My uncle survived. But that's the kind of person my dad was. He put his loved ones through it. He really did. So that was pretty much life at home, just the chaos and the violence. When I was about 13 years old, I really started getting into music. And like I said, I liked going to concerts and stuff. And my dad did allow me to do that, but he did not like it. Boy, he did not like it. And it made him like... Looking back, I think what it was is because my dad was a liar and a cheater and an abuser. Him thinking my mom he thought my mom was going to cheat on him, you know what I mean, or do something like that. And that wasn't the case. My mom was a sweet woman and she was completely dedicated and loyal to my dad. But that's what he was doing. He was out cheating and lying and deceiving and doing all that type of stuff. So, but that's so that he just expected her to be that way, but that wasn't the case. My dad was weird, and I wasn't allowed to go to my friends' houses, couldn't spend the night. I remember in school I made like the cut to be in the dance recital. My parents didn't have a car to get me to school. I mean, I really was robbed of a childhood, I really was. But, and I didn't really have many friends in school. I couldn't be normal. I wasn't allowed to be normal. I wasn't. And there's nothing normal about my life, but I was not allowed to be normal. So I was always the outcast in school, and with the name Precious and all that, I would use your imagination. So when I was about 14, that's when, 14, I started going to some concerts and doing that with my mom, and that was an outlet for me, and I was so excited, but my parents didn't have money for that stuff. So I wanted to get a job. I wanted to work. So I wasn't allowed to have a normal job and get a paycheck. But one day when I was 14, there was a flyer put on my door, and it said, 14 years or older, no experience needed, we'll pick you up, cash money. So that was the ticket. It was door-to-door sales, and my dad was not into it at all because, as abusive as he was, he knew that there was, a lot of predators, and I was his daughter, and he didn't want me to go door-to-door to strangers. But my uncle actually kind of talked my dad into it. So from the time I was 14 to 19, I did door-to-door sales, and I made quite a bit of money doing it. I made cash money, and my mom and I would travel around and go see Billy Ray Cyrus, and I wasn't going into regular school anymore. 8th grade was the last time I went, was 7th grade. It was 7th grade was my last year of regular school. So 8th grade, I started going to independent studies, and I preferred that so much better because I didn't have to go every day, and wasn't made fun of every day, and that was a lot better. But my mom would leave me at home with my dad, and she would go work, and my dad sometimes would take me out on his endeavors that I shouldn't have been involved in. He'd make me sit in the car and stuff, but he would leave me for hours on end and do God only knows what. And then I was told to not tell my mother. In fact, my dad would tell me, if you tell your mother, it'll be 1,000,000 times worse for her. And of course, my mother would be able to tell as soon as she saw me that something was wrong, and then all hell would break loose. I mean, we're talking about some really serious fights, you guys. Guns getting pulled, cops coming, helicopter, you name it. So my upbringing and stuff, that was gnarly. But so when it came 8th grade, I was going to independent studies. I dug that. That wasn't as bad. But I wasn't getting the proper education. I was cheating my way through it, because still at home, all the violence was going on and the chaos. And as a little child like that, when my parents would fight, I would always go find little small places to hide in. I just felt safer when I would hide in places. And I would get lost in movies. And I would like to pretend that someday someone would come and save me. You know, I remember actually Billy Ray Cyrus, that country star that I really liked growing up, he had a song called Enough is Enough. And if I remember correctly, it was, enough is enough, enough tears have been shed, enough hurt has been hidden, enough blood has been bled. Enough is enough, let it rain love and trust, till the still fist of rage has fallen into rest. Something like that. He wrote a song about child abuse. And I remember listening to that song and thinking, Billy Ray Cyrus is going to come save me one day. But those were outlets for me, you know, getting lost into movies and just play acting in my room about someone coming to save me one day. So that was pretty much my home life. High school, I didn't have a high school. I didn't go to classes. I didn't go to dances. I didn't go to graduation, but I did graduate. And when I was, I think I was, all I wanted to do was find somebody, like have a boyfriend and leave home. That's what I wanted to do more than anything in the world. That's what I wanted to do. And my dad wasn't allowed to have friends. Well, guess what? I also wasn't allowed to date. He told my mom that I couldn't date until I was 18 years old. He wouldn't have it. And so when 18 came along, I didn't have any friends. I didn't have any outlets. I didn't have anything except going to concerts. But I ended up doing my door-to-door sales. I met a guy who had I think it was a carpet cleaning business, and he had a dog named Mika. And anyone that follows me on Instagram or anything knows that I'm like an animal rights activist. I'm a dog mom, a dog lover. I love dogs. And he had a dog, and I think her name was Mika. And he did like me, but he was just my friend. And he ended up getting into some band. He was a drummer. And that's where I met my first husband. I was 19 years old. I was never been out on a date, never been kissed, nothing. And that's how I met my first husband. He was a bass player, and this guy was a drummer, and that's how we met. And he ended up getting along with my dad okay, but my dad used to make fun of him and call him Pugsley. I guess he looked like Pugsley from Addams Family. But anyways, I just wanted to get out. And that's, I would definitely say that to mothers and stuff. Sometimes your kids just want to run away so bad. They end up getting involved with people they wouldn't have normally have gotten involved with because they were just looking for an escape exit, you know what I mean? And that's kind of what I did. But hold on, let me go back a little bit. So I wasn't allowed to date, I wasn't allowed to do anything. And I ended up, I'm not going to say who, but I had this, I'm talking a serious crush on this country music star. And now I'm 18, I'm free, I can go do this on my own. Even though my dad was still very controlling, I was an adult. And so I started traveling around a little bit to see this, not Billy Ray Cyrus, somebody else. And I look back, they were a little leery of me because I was obviously really young. But I just want to say my very first kiss, I was 19 years old, and I believe the guy was 36 or 37, and he was a country superstar, and it was on the back of his tour bus. I was shaking. And I remember the guy goes, "Why are you shaking?" I was so nervous, you guys. I was so nervous. And I was like, well, that was my first kiss. And I remember he goes, "How old are you? Are you underage?" And he got so scared. But I was 18. But anyway, so I had my first kiss on the back of this tour bus. So now I am about 6 months later. I meet this guy who has a dog, who's a drummer for a band. And then the bass player was the guy that my dad used to call Pugsley, and we ended up getting together. Now I look back, I was so young, I had zero experience. I mean, we're talking zero experience. I didn't do normal bad kid things that are just normal. I didn't do any of it. I was too scared to. But I ended up seeing him, and he lived in a house with a bunch of bandmates, and he knew it was he was 10 years older than me, this guy. I was 19 and he was 29 years old. He knew it was kind of a bad idea. He liked me, but he knew that it was a bad idea. But he asked my dad if I could move in with him, and I don't remember everything about it. It was so long ago, but my dad was very much against it, but he ended up letting me do it. And so I ended up moving in with this guy in this, like a band house, basically. And they were all 10, 12 years older than me, so it was kind of a trip. And I kept doing the door-to-door sales. So what happened is me and this guy ended up getting married in a hush-hush with the judge situation. We never told my folks. My mom knew, but we kept it from my father the whole time. He never knew. But anyways, we went and we got married, and which was a total mistake. He was my second kiss, but everything else was my first everything. And I was a good girl. I really was. But that was a very, very bad relationship. He was abusive. He didn't want to be in that relationship with me. I was too young for him. He liked to do drugs too, and he liked to have, different types of, sex and stuff. I was too young. I had no business being with this person and being married, but that was my first marriage. And what happened was I was doing my door-to-door sales, and he ended up wanting to get in a different band. So there was two brothers from Missouri, a guitarist and a drummer, Jason and Eric. I'll never forget them. And my husband went and tried out for them. And they had a kind of, they really didn't have a Deftones vibe, but just a little bit like Deftones from the Sacramento. I love that band. But anyways, he got into that band, and the drummer's girl was a dancer. And their sister was 19 years old as well. I was 6 months older than her, but we were both 19 at the same time. And she was an outcast too. We looked totally opposite. She was really tall, leggy, dark hair, looked like a Victoria's Secret model. But girls were mean to her as well. She was made fun of a lot. And we were kind of forced to become friends, and we became friends. And we had a friendship that lasted from the time we were 19 until our mid-30s. I was there when our daughter was born. We went through everything good and bad together. But we were talking, and we're like, man, we really want to make some money. And I don't know if anyone my age bracket remembers. I believe it was either Showtime or HBO. For a period of time, they had a show on called G-String Divas, and it was all about dancers, strippers. And they made it look so glamorous, and it made it look fun. And so we had a direct in because her brother, the drummer, had a dancer for a girlfriend, and she introduced us to stripping. So here I am, 19 years old, going to Reno with a experienced dancer and my best friend, and we went to Reno and we got licensed, and you have to go through a whole thing to get, be able to dance there, and we got hired at Fantasy Girls in Reno. And man, oh man, it was so hard for me at first. But I got into the lifestyle of stripping. And we would go to Reno. I went to Vegas once. That was too much for me. That was way too much for me, Vegas. That was way too much, when you're first starting out. But I got really good. I made so much money. I couldn't even believe how much money was just being thrown at me. Me and her both. And it was funny because one of the last times her and I spoke, we laughed about the conversation when we were on the phone, saying, we should just go dancing and make $10,000 or $15,000 and then quit. It doesn't work that way. It was that became a lifestyle for me for years and years and years. And I got into the life of dancing. And my marriage ended up falling apart. He cheated on me. It was violent. It was no good. But he cheated on me, And I couldn't get over that. You know, once you're cheated on, it's really hard to you can forgive them and get back together, but like it never really, it's ruined. It's ruined. That relationship was totally ruined. So what happened is now I'm dancing, I'm making all this money, me and him are splitting up, and now I'm starting to get like some confidence, and I'm, you know, everyone's telling me, you should be on TV, you should do this, you should do that. And so it's like every other woman involved in that, I wanted to be in Playboy. I wanted to do all that. And so, and start a website. So I did start a website, and I started a website, and I started getting into just, you know, local modeling, like with cars and all that type of stuff. And I ended up having a really cool MySpace page. And I remember, I don't know if people remember back in the day, there was Tila Tequila and Forbidden. Well, I think I was like number 2 or number 3 as one of, at a certain time period where I was like one of the top MySpace girls. And I was traveling around, and it was a lot of fun. It was fun. It was. But I got introduced to that whole world. Now me and my husband are split up, and you know, I make all this money, and I'm going back and forth to Los Angeles all the time. It was a crazy time. Well, my best friend, the one I started dancing with, her brother wanted to do a musical project. You know, very sexy, erotic, really kind of inappropriate. But we did it, and we ended up getting in a couple movies, and all kinds of stuff started happening, and I really thought, you know, it was really cool. But really, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. And I had offers for like porn and stuff like that. I never went down that road, ever. But I almost did. I considered it, I should say. But I wouldn't have lasted. I wouldn't have lasted because that's just way too much for me. But, so I went through a period of modeling, having my website, traveling around, making all this money. And what happened was I got an email from I don't even know who they were, but it was these 2 guys starting an internet show, and I think it was going to be called The Show. And they asked me to audition for it, and I did. And then they asked me to audition for it again. And I guess it was between me and like I think there was a King's cheerleader. We were the ones that they were picking, and it ended up being me, and I can't believe that. It was funny. I finally got picked or something. So anyways, they had me, I was supposed to be interviewing local talent. And so it was in 2006, my first interview. I forget the name of the band. It may have been Losing All Pride. I'm not sure. But I had to go interview them, and I don't think I did very good. I was so nervous. But when I showed up to the front gate of the music studio, Sacramento Rehearsal Studios. It was right off of Fruit Ridge and Watt Avenue. I go to the gate, and you got to get in with like a code, and there's 2 guys waiting out there. One of them I ended up marrying. They were in a band, and they were very young. They were younger than me. Like, I was 26. They were like 23, 24. And so I interviewed that one band, and then one of them gave me the information, and I told the show, and then we went back, and we interviewed their band. And I had an instant connection with this guy. In fact, he looked just like that country star that gave me my first kiss on the back of the bus at 19. So that was pretty cool. And I ended up being in such a horrible relationship. It was on and off. It's what I call karmic, and I will definitely go into that in my other videos. But it was such a dark relationship. It was so codependent. It was so toxic. He was full of drugs, alcoholism, very narcissistic. He was narcissistic. He abused me. He made me feel like, you know, I wasn't good enough and what I was doing was stupid, and, you know, but he would spend all my money. It was a typical bad relationship full of violence and hate. But, I'm going to go into that in my other video. So that's how I met my husband there. And again, all the violence and everything I went through was familiar. It was what I grew up with. Drugs, violence, accusations, a man not working, a woman working, supporting the man. No woman should have to do that. No woman should have to do that. It should be either like a team effort, or the man should be the man. That's just kind of how I feel about it. But it was a typical bad relationship that lasted way too long. We broke up. He ended up moving to Oregon. I followed him. Things went really bad there. And then we came back home. And it was just a really, really, really bad relationship. And when I was in the relationship, I absolutely believed I loved this person. I did. But now as an adult looking back, that was not love. When you don't trust somebody and you got to go through their phone all the time, both ways with me and him, no respect, lies, deceit, that's not a relationship I want to be in, you know what I mean? But I had a really hard time letting that relationship go. I really, really did. And when I talk about karmic relationships, because I told you guys I'm going to be doing another video about my twin flame journey, I'll be explaining all the karmic and what all that stuff means. But it was a relationship designed to teach you lessons. It was not meant to last. But when you're in it, it's hard to accept that. It's hard to, you don't even know that. You're fighting for your relationship. And I'll tell you what, if I could go back in time and just not fight and not reason with people, I would just love to go back in time and never fight with these people ever, because what a waste of energy staying up all night crying. You know, it was awful. It was a horrible relationship. I'm glad that's over with. But anyways, we ended up ultimately splitting up, and he went back to Oregon, and that was in 2014. So now I'm on my own all over again, and I moved from Sacramento, and I get a little house, and I start a whole new journey. So I believe it was from 1999, that's so crazy to me, to 2019. Is it 2019? No, I take that back. It was 1999 to 2014 where I was consistently dancing. And boy, I witnessed a lot of stuff through all that, and it caused so many problems in the relationships I was in. And my ex-husband, the guy I was talking about, he struggled so bad with me dancing, but he didn't care enough to get a job and make it any different for me. Or when he would get a job, every penny he would make would go to drugs, Oxycontin, any kind of Vicodin, Xanax, and music equipment. And it was a typical struggling musician and a dancer together, and all I did was spend my money on him and be told how horrible I was and how much he didn't love me, and we fought and fought and fought. And my Uncle Steve that lived with me and my family, I just briefly told you about him. In 2012, he got really sick and he ended up passing away. And I'm just going to keep it, he provided a lot of pills and stuff for my ex-husband, but he was helping him sell them and stuff, trying to help him make some money. They were poor, but they did do that together. And when my uncle passed away, I took it really hard. He was my friend. My uncle was my friend. Sometimes I would just go hang out with him. And he got very sick. I don't really want to go into detail about all that, but I was by his side when he ended up dying. And I remember I called my husband from the hospital to tell him this is probably pretty much it. And I told them I think that they're letting him die naturally, but they were basically just overdosing him until, he would go to sleep. But my uncle was such a drug addict. My dad was such a drug addict. The doctors just could not believe how much they could take and not even pass out. But what happened was, when my uncle passed away, my husband really treated me badly. I don't know why. I look back on it, I just don't know why. He saw me so hurt, crying, I was sad. And I remember him saying, why do you even care? Why do you even care? He was basically just a piece of crap. That's what my husband would say. And, he said that about my dad, too, because I'm jumping all over the place. I'm sorry. When my dad passed away, oh, my gosh, dude, he just totally abandoned me. When I was living in Oregon, I knew my dad was sick. He had COPD. He was a chain smoker my whole life, 4 packs a day, and it caught up with him. And, he had COPD. We were on very bad terms at the time because my dad he was just a tortured soul. He was messed up in the head. And so anyways, when I was living in Oregon he ended up becoming my husband. He was my boyfriend at the time. But my dad really declined. And, my mother didn't tell me. when I asked her down the road, why didn't you tell me? She was like, well, I didn't think you would care. I don't know why people thought that, but my dad was just so brutal and so abusive that that's what people assumed. But he was still my father. He's still my dad. And I love my father through it all. I love my dad. To right this second, I love my father, and I pray in the name of Jesus Christ that he is in heaven. I'm not sure, so that really bothers me. But anyways, he had COPD, and he declined while I was living in that period of time in Oregon. And in Oregon, I ended up getting pregnant, and it's a long story. I don't really want to go into all of it, but I ended up having an abortion, and you know, my husband was very hard on me about that. He did not want me to have that baby, but he didn't have the guts to tell me. He just made me feel horrible about everything I was doing. And that was one of the last times I actually spoke to my father. I called him on the phone to tell him that I was pregnant, and he hung up on me. But he was out of his mind on drugs and everything. So anyways, I moved back to Oregon. I went through this horrible abortion. That was the only time I've ever been pregnant. It was an awful, awful experience. It was horrible. You know, I definitely have a baby in heaven. You know, it's hard to talk about. But so when I came back from Oregon, my father's health had totally declined. And he was, you know, never ignore your intuition and when your gut is telling you something, because there's a reason for that. So many people, we just put that to the side. I knew something was wrong. I had no idea he was as sick as he was. And so just kind of out of the blue one day, I got a phone call from a police officer saying, your dad is dead. We're with your mother. We're taking him to the hospital. It was 5 o'clock traffic. It was raining outside. I lived in Sacramento, and it's about 40 minutes from where the hospital was. So I drove there. And when I got there, they said, well, we got his heart beating, but it didn't look good because he hadn't had air that whole time. And so I was with my dad for 24 hours in the hospital before we did the unplug thing and watched him die. It was awful. That's my father. The bottoms of his feet were black. I didn't get to say goodbye to him. And my dad wasn't like an old looking man. I mean, he was in his 50s, but my dad, even though he was sick and had a bloated stomach and his skin was all pale, he still was handsome. Seriously, my dad, he was handsome. But anyway, so, you know, it was me, my mom, and my uncles with me, and he died. My mom couldn't wait to get out of the room. She just had so much 30 years with this man of abuse and torture. I can't blame her, but I didn't want to leave my dad's side. So, okay, guys, so I'm talking about, there's no way I'm going to be able to put all my life story in this one situation. But what I am going to tell you, I was not saved. I did not know Jesus at the time. No, it's not that he was forbidden. It's just no one really ever shared it with me. And I hadn't spoken to my dad in a very long time, so I'm going to tell you guys this, and I'm going to go into a whole other video about it. But my dad was a tortured soul. And for years, he would tell my mother, I believe somebody's following me, there's someone tapping me on the shoulder, tapping my foot. Well, that's pretty normal with drug use, you know what I mean? You hallucinate and stuff. But he always felt that there was a demon on him. Well, I'm going to share this with you guys, and I will go in depth down the road. But it was 24 hours after he passed away. I went to stay with my mother in her apartment. And I went, my mom and dad had separate bedrooms. And I went into that bedroom to sleep in my dad's room to feel close to him. And I was attacked. I woke up, could not move. I was paralyzed with fear. There was something on top of me choking me. I was not on drugs, nothing like that. It was just like a movie. You can't move. I couldn't see a face. I saw 2 pale arms and a black shirt down to here. It was choking me. And I was facing, you know, this way. And it just stopped. And then I looked over to my my right, and it was facing a big window, and the sun was coming in. I didn't know what I thought of it at the time. I just finally got up, and I ran out the door. And I told my husband, he was staying there. We were just boyfriend and girlfriend at the time. But I told him what happened. And then I fell asleep. And when I woke up, he was over in the corner shaking and quivering, and he said, whatever just happened to you, happened to you. Let's get the hell out of here. I'm not going to abandon my mother. I'm not. But he sure did abandon me. Heck yeah, he did. He couldn't wait to get out and get high and leave me in that whole situation. So basically what I'm telling you guys is I was in a life of abuse and fighting and chaos, and everyone I loved pretty much, you know, hurt me and turned on me. And it was an absolute awful experience. I do have good memories. My mom did do what she could to provide good things, but it was so far and few in between. It really was. It was hard, and going into that whole life of dancing and having to lie about it to my dad, and ending up with guys that were all very similar to my dad, it just led me down the dark road, a very dark road. And it was, like I said, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So in this video where I'm sharing my life story with you guys, I am going to go into so much depth about the demon attack, about my twin flame journey, about specific types of abuse and how I coped with it and all that type of stuff. But in a nutshell, I have been tormented my whole life, and I only wish somebody would have shared Jesus with me back then. I wish someone would have shared Jesus with me. But when I ended up leaving my husband in 2014, and I moved to a town about 40 minutes outside of Sacramento. It was called Lodi, California. I got such a cute little house, and me and my German Shepherd Abby moved out there for basically a new beginning. Oh my gosh, man, I can't, the things that have happened to me since I ventured out for my new beginning, I don't even know where to start. But what I will say is, in December of 2018, I was working at a restaurant. I was involved in probably the worst relationship of my life with another musician. My gosh, he was sexually abusive, drug addict. He was like so vindictive and spiteful, and he didn't trust me, and he didn't believe anything I said. He was very jealous of my relationship that I haven't even talked about yet, because I'm saving that for my twin flame video. But he knew who that guy was, and he was very jealous. And I did talk a lot about my twin flame, which I haven't even spoken in this video, but this was a very important relationship in my life, which I'm going to go into detail about. But this boyfriend of mine couldn't handle it. He could not handle it. He would make me send him mean messages and call him and tell him I hated him. I mean, it was a horrible, horrible, horrible relationship. And that's what happens when your heart gets broken and you are shown as a child to accept abuse and stuff like that. But anyways, so I was working at a restaurant, and the worst relationship of my entire life. It was back and forth, on and off. He interfered in all of my friendships. He lied about me. He twisted every bit of truth. He caused me so many problems. And I did care for him, and I did have love for him. I tried to make it work, but this man knew that my heart did belong to somebody else at the time, and I understand that. But I was committed to him, and I was devoted to him, and he just refused to believe it. So anyways, I stopped dancing. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm trying to, start a new life. But I'm with this boyfriend who just, you guys have no idea. You just don't have any idea what he put me through. He drove me to insanity, having me constantly go through my phone, explain things over and over again, steal my phone. He would take a situation and he would twist it into something else. It was an absolute nightmare, you guys. Nightmare. He drove me. I will talk about it in my other videos about all the suicide and all those issues I had when I was telling you I really wanted to die. I was with this person that was literally sent by the devil. This man was sent by the devil to take me to hell without a shadow of a doubt. I know that's what that relationship was. And so in 2018, I'm in this horrible relationship. I'm working at a restaurant, and this this older lady and her son came in, and I waited on them, and they shared Jesus with me. But I didn't accept it on the spot. I didn't. But he came in a couple times, and he brought me this book. This very book. This is the book he brought me, my Jesus Calling book. And it sat on my dresser for a couple of months before I decided to pick it up and read it. And when I picked it up and I started reading it, I couldn't stop. Could not stop. And on, I think it was June 4th at 10:37 at night, this man texted me and he asked me flat out, do you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior? And for some reason I said yes. And that was the start of that journey 4 years ago. So I ended up working at that restaurant, and this mom and son came in and they brought me this book. And this book and that conversation have changed my life. It changed my life. And now I'm living for Jesus. And I am going to go into great detail about like the suicide and all that stuff. I just wanted to die. I was so heartbroken. I was heartbroken. And this book, and then starting to pray, and everything just blew my mind. And basically, Jesus not only sent these people to help me, to help save me, and to bring me to Him, He opened my eyes spiritually and called on me in this time that we're living in. This time we're living in, obviously we all know we're going into a really dark time, and the Bible, all the Bible prophecy is just coming true before our eyes. And so now I'm going to take all of this stuff and I'm going to try to bring as many people as I can to the cross with Jesus Christ. I would be dead. Jesus was looking out for me 12 years ago, 20 years ago. There were so many incidences that happened where I should have been dead. I will share, this is a crazy thing that happened. But one of the last times I saw, like I was, talking with my ex-boyfriend, the man that was sent by the devil, man, straight up. I was with him at his mother's house, and I knew I shouldn't be there. And he was involved. Even he enjoyed really, really dark, crazy sex, stuff that I really wasn't into, but he was my boyfriend, and I was backing out of that relationship. I hadn't been saved yet, because I'm going back by just a few weeks. Because this situation I'm telling you about happened 3 weeks before I was saved. And we were in his room doing what we were doing, and I didn't feel right about it. And there was a candle burning, and I could smell smoke, and he could smell smoke. And then we looked, and this little glade candle was literally engulfed in a flame. And he goes, blow it out, blow it out, blow it out. And I crawled over to it, and well, finally the third time it blew out, and it exploded in my face. I mean, I had like 50 little tiny burns all over my face and neck. And when that happened, we both stopped, and we both got quiet, and it was a really weird moment. 2 days later, that's when I completely broke up with him. That was God, my angels, however you want to view it. They said enough is enough. Get out of here, because that man and that situation was taking me straight to hell. And then 3 weeks later, my friend and his mother asked me if I accepted Jesus, and I did. So when I look back in all these situations, and I barely scratched the surface. It's not easy to tell your life story. There's so many parts. But when I look back on that situation, I just cry my eyes out with gratitude towards God, because He pulled me out of that situation, and then, He started me on the path that I'm on now. And now I currently have a really good relationship with my mother. She's married to a wonderful man who I love, who takes care of my mother. And we're really good friends, and I love my mom so much. I love my stepfather. So now I'm living for God, and I'm sharing my stories and my testimonies to try to help people. And, you don't need to be ashamed of your past or anything like that. We've all done things. We've all gone through things. And it just kind of builds us to be who we become. You know what I mean? It builds us to be who we end up becoming. So growing up was hard. The roads I went down of stripping and then drugs, and I was never big into drugs, but I sure did like pills, and I sure did like things to help me sleep, things to escape the pain I was in. And I struggled with suicide for about 4 or 5 years. I tried killing myself multiple times. I was involved in these horrible relationships with beatings, just totally being belittled and demeaned, and all the money I made just being spent on nothing. And it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. But I do thank that mother and her son for bringing me that book and becoming my friends. And I'm just so grateful in the name of Jesus that I survived and I came out better than ever, and that I have the guts to do this. Jesus called on me. He called on me and he told me to do this. In my spirit, he said, Precious, you share all this, and I have your back. And we're going to bring as many people to the cross as we can. So that's what I'm trying to do. So in a nutshell, that's a little bit of my life story. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and know that I'm going to be coming out with as many videos as I can. I am going to be discussing my twin flame journey and parts like my suicide issues and drugs. I'm going to have many videos, you know, talking about that stuff, but I wanted to give you guys a little backstory on my life, which is literally like a horror movie meets Lifetime. That's what it is. And I'm going to be doing that as soon as I can, and I really hope, I pray that people that are struggling with faith or feeling inadequate, not chasing their dreams, rejecting Jesus, please get a hold of me and we can talk, because I'm telling you, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. The enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy, and he will sell you any lie, anything to keep you going down that path. There's two paths, people. One takes you to hell and one takes you to heaven, and there's many detours along the way and many, ways of getting there. Jesus Christ is the only way. He is the only way. He is the one, and all you have to do is accept him into your heart and tell him to show you the truth. Tell him to show you the truth, and he will, and you can start going towards the light. So I hope you enjoyed this. Again, this is the first time I've ever done anything like this, and there's so much to say, and I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing the best I can with it. But with all that being said, I hope everyone has a blessed day, a blessed evening in Jesus' name, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you very much for watching my video, and have a blessed evening. Amen.